We begin with a man who has his finger on the pulse of the most pressing issue in this presidential election. Robert Reich is one of America's influential political economists. He's a best-selling author and is a member of the faculty of Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government. He also serves as a key economic advisor to Governor Bill Clinton. He's a longtime Clinton friend, having first met him when they were both going over to London to be Rhodes Scholars. Welcome. Do I have that right? You both were going over, and that's when you first met, when you were on the boat going over to...
Yeah, well, actually, I got very seasick. We were a bunch of Rhodes Scholars in those days used to go over together.
Together,
I don't know what they do now.
Right.
One day out...
Not first class,
not third class. Yeah. I got very seasick, went down to my cabin, and thought I was going to die. There were 3 days left on that sea voyage, and knock on the door, and this big, lanky guy who I'd met on the dock, just briefly, holding chicken soup in one hand and crackers. And my mother could not have done it better. He said, "I understand your feeling." And he basically nursed me back to health. His name was Bill Clinton.
And he said, "I want to be your president."
Well, you know, it's funny.
He did confess. He told you that he wanted to be president.
Now, wait a minute. He
said,
first of all, remember, in those days, it was very admirable for somebody to have ambitions to serve, to want to be president.
Public service was noble.
Well, it was noble. Remember, this is after John F. Kennedy and after Martin Luther King and after Bobby Kennedy, and it's 1968. It's before Watergate. Right. It's before, Iran-gate and everything else. I mean, public service was admirable. If somebody in 1968 had come up to me and said, I want to be a plastics magnate and make $1 million before I'm 50, I'm not sure that would be quite as admirable.
That's from The Graduate.
But he did clearly have his eyes set on political
public
office.
Service,
We did joke once. He did say by the 90s, maybe the president.
He said in the 80s I'm going to be governor of Arkansas, in the 90s I'm going to run for president.
He said in the 90s, maybe president. But it was, we'd laugh about it.
Sure. And you said what?
I said good luck.
No, but what did you say about yourself? I mean, what were your plans?
I had no particular plans. I wanted to be in public service, and I wanted to teach, wanted to write. I wanted to do, in retrospect, pretty much what I'm now doing.
You're now in the polls about, the Clinton candidacy looks good. You're in there. I mean, you look very good, strong in California.
I get worried when you say that.
It does look good. I'm just telling you what the polls say. I'm telling you what the polls say, and they're as high as they were going into the Republican convention.
How many days left?
Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
In politics, a day is a long time, a lifetime. But here's the question. I'll bet you that you're beginning to see already people saying, looking in the mirror, saying, I think I look like a Secretary of Defense. I think I might be good at OMB.
Actually,
maybe Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General at least.
Charlie, the problem is you have this pent-up demand. 12 years of being out of power. You have, on top of that, all of these baby boomers. Every liberal or slightly left-of-center baby boomer who has always had his heart or her heart set on public service. This may be
the time. In 1980, when Ronald Reagan, if they were then 30, they're now 42 years old. They've seen those prime years. If they were 40, they're now 52.
That's right. This may be the only opportunity they ever have. And you have, Washington, of course, is filled. Every law firm in Washington is filled with people who want to be in the administration. Every firm in New York. You have investment bankers, but you have a lot of people in the state government, a lot of people in the local government. You have a lot of people in public...
I want to talk about economics in a minute, but tell me who the 5 people closest to Bill Clinton are. I mean, if a man is known by his friends, who are the 5 people closest to him?
The interesting thing, Charlie, about Bill Clinton is that he has a very large number of friends. It's not as if they're 5 close confidants. He must have 25, 30, 40 people that he talks with. He shares information, he gets information.
Well, I just read a story today. It was in Saturday's Boston Globe, saying there may be some problems ahead because Clinton's he wants to sign off on every decision. It was a story on Saturday's Boston Globe called Clinton as Strategist, saying that he says, I don't want any decision made unless I have approved him. Because when he was in Arkansas, he was both essentially campaign manager as well as candidate. And now, because he's gone through what he has gone through, he wants to make damn sure it doesn't get screwed up.
Listen,
and there's danger in that. I mean, it's the old notion of a lawyer
every governor
who represents himself has a fool for a client.
Every governor, particularly of small states, southern states, who's very smart, a governor who's very smart, you get accustomed to having people around you who may not be quite as smart as you are, and you have to take responsibility. I think Bill is... I don't think it's a weakness because he very, very quickly, he gives responsibility. This campaign is a good example. At the beginning of the campaign, he was his own campaign manager. He didn't give his staff very much responsibility at all, but he learned how competent they were, and boom, he gave it to them.
Well, but as this thing gets tighter and meaner and tougher, I mean, there are many people who argue you need a baker on board, someone who really knows the candidate and who can make decisions if the candidate's out there on the hustlings doing his job.
Well,
and there's a question as to whether this campaign has one.
The campaign has some very senior people. There is no Baker.
Right.
It's not an authoritarian campaign. It's not a hierarchical campaign. Now, so far, it's worked.
Right.
What you're saying is when the going gets really, really tough over the next month and a half, is it going to continue to work? I don't know. Every time I worry, Charlie, I'm a born worrier, right? Particularly about politics and economics.
Yeah.
Every time
I first talked to you, you said this is really about 1996. It's not about 92.
That's right. I did not think in those days. Bill Clinton, a year ago May, came up to my house. We spent all night almost talking on my porch. Another friend about whether he should run, and he was doubtful. This other friend was very skeptical. I said, run, my tail wagging. Of course, I wanted to run. But this other friend...
Get out there and do it.
I said, do it. Don't even talk about it. This other friend said, look, you're from a small state. It's not wealthy. There's going to be very hard raising money.
Right.
The economy's probably going to be turning up.
Yeah, Mary Cuomo may get in, and he'll have a lot going for him.
He listed one, and Bill Clinton had a response for every one of those arguments about why he shouldn't go. I knew he was going to run.
Because he was arguing the negative?
Because he was responding to every one of the negatives. He had thought through so carefully.
So he'd satisfied himself on all those points.
And he thought he might win.
Yeah.
Even, I'll tell you something, even 12 weeks ago, at the bottom, remember he got California.
Right.
He won California primary, and then Ross Perot came in, and he was at the bottom of the heap. He was 12%. I was having some orthopedic surgery. I was feeling depressed. He called me. He was trying to cheer me up. And I said, Bill, you're the one who deserves cheering up.
I mean, you're at 20% of the polls.
You've killed yourself in these primaries, and look what's happened. How do you feel? And there was a pause, and he said, we're going to win.
What do they worry about? Ross Perot entering again? Because if Ross Perot comes back in, it might endanger his potential in California.
I think they're... I don't know what they're...
It's a wild card, and it could have the same kind of force. If, as some people say, if the votes could shift as fast as they have, after that period when he was way low, then it could shift back. Because most people believe that the support for both candidates is not very deep. It's a lot of it there.
That's what I worry about. But I have other worries. Iraq.
Right.
But I think George Bush is setting
an
up...
October surprise.
An October surprise. You got the Saudis already agreeing to go in. You have a partitioning of Iraq. Protecting the Shiites. Why are we protecting the Shiites? We're not even protecting the Serbs. Yeah. Why are we protecting the Shiites? So we could easily have some sort of skirmish in October that created a yellow ribbon commander-in-chief phenomenon that changed.
Let me talk about the military thing, the draft. Did you have soulful conversations with him at Oxford about the draft?
I was there in October and September of 1969, the critical times. In fact, I have a letter from September, I think, of 1969.
Okay.
And just before we went over for the second year, he said that he had relinquished, or was going to relinquish, his ROTC deferment, and he wanted to know if he could sleep on my or some of the other Rhodes Scholars' floors, because he was not going to get rental. He was not going to rent a room for the second year because he was going to be called up, he thought. So it wasn't until after, I guess, the end of October, November, that he knew he was not going to be called up. There was a whole period of time in which he did.
But you've got to be disappointed, because the perception is that the issue is not whether he served or whoever. The perception is, why can't they get the story right? Why does it seem to be so muddled? Why does it seem to be evasive? Why does it come out sequentially?
Yeah, I find it frustrating, Charlie, because A, I was there, and I know that everything he said is exactly right. And I say to people, when they say to me, just as you did, why did he have to play games? Why couldn't he get it out straight? I say, exactly what did he not get out? Where was he playing games? What was...
I don't have it right here at me, but I could cite you in terms of people who've looked at this, including a piece that was just in the Washington Post over the weekend, that it has come out, did you know about, even the question about what his uncle did for him, Roger Clinton, whatever his uncle's name was, what he had done for him with respect to the seat in the naval thing. Would he not have known about that?
But he didn't know that.
Why didn't that come up before?
He didn't even know
and
his
then
uncle?
It came up later that, in fact, somebody in the Naval Reserve had said something about it. It doesn't seem to be, Every time you think this issue has been closed, it seems to open up again.
But I'll tell you something. I don't know what his uncle did in lobbying, and I don't know whether he knew, but you have an economy right now, Charlie, that is dead in the water. I don't think Americans care all that much whether Bill Clinton knew that his uncle was lobbying
Bear
with
with
the
me a
other
second,
person.
No, they do only in the standpoint of they need somebody they can trust. And the question of this seems to be one of those issues where the Bush campaign is trying to hang trust on this and credibility, as they do about free trade. You know, if he doesn't know what to make up his mind and back on one side and one side on the other, where does he stand on this? I mean,
that's where I find
problem. Why does he need to see the fine print? Either you are in favor of free trade or you're not.
But this is why I find it so incredible, because here you have George Bush. He said he was going to be the education president.
Right.
The environmental president.
Right.
No new taxes.
Right.
I mean, he's complaining that you can't trust the other guy. I mean, here's a guy who basically stands for nothing. He has changed his mind about everything. And he's complaining that because of the draft, the uncle didn't say the da-da-da. It's completely disproportionate. We have an economy that desperately, desperately needs help right now.
Everybody agrees on that. Now, here's the question. Is it George Bush's fault that the economy is in the shape that it is? Others will say to you, look at what's happening in Japan. I mean, look at what happened to the stock market in Japan. We just saw what the German bank did today in terms of lowering interest rates over there. I mean, we've got a worldwide economy that is not doing so well. And can we blame all of this and put all of this at the foot of George Bush?
No, you can't blame all of it on George Bush. George Bush, I mean, partly you can blame his predecessor, Ronald Reagan.
Right.
One of the reasons that we have this recession, and this recession is so deep and prolonged, is that debt load that we got from the 1980s. That debt,
right.
Corporate debt, personal debt, government debt. We have a $4 trillion debt. Where did that come from? That was Ronald Reagan and George Bush. And people say, well, what about Congress? Didn't Congress create this debt? Over the past 4 years, George Bush has asked Congress for $1.1 billion more than Congress gave them. Now, I grant you, there are...
But a central part of the Clinton economic plan is a significant public investment in terms of rebuilding the infrastructure of this country, correct?
Absolutely.
That is the center, and you're going to do that because you want to create jobs, correct?
And also you want to build the economy of the future. Give me just a second here. And people, this is a very important point people don't get. In the new global economy, every factor of production, except two, goes across borders very easily. Technology now goes, money sloshes across borders. Factories, equipment, corporations, there are only two factors that are relatively immobile, rooted inside a nation's borders, on which our future uniquely depends. People, that is their skills, their insights, what they have up here, and infrastructure. Roads, bridges. If you don't invest in people and infrastructure, you've got nothing.
Okay,
and that's something we haven't been doing.
Okay, but what does that do for the deficit? That's the critical question. Most people, most economists, you included, believe that the deficit, unless we do something about the deficit, we're never going to get this country moving again.
You have two problems. You've got the deficit in terms of burdening the future, and you've got this lack of investment in terms of burdening the future.
Right.
You don't want to reduce the deficit right away because you have unemployment. You have underutilized industrial capacity. If you try to reduce the deficit right now, you could make things even worse, Charlie. You need to get economic growth. You see, the world is divided between those who think that in order to get growth, you have to reduce the deficit, and those who think that in order to reduce the deficit, you've got to get growth. Interestingly,
Jack Kemp believes in the latter, that in order to reduce the deficit, you've got to have economic growth. And so does Bill Clinton?
And so does Bill Clinton and a lot of his advisors.
All right.
Because fundamentally, growth is the issue. Jobs, everything depends on growth.
I've got to go to the break, but just take a second and listen to this. Bush wants to believe, this is how they frame the differences. Bush wants to leave the government, let the free market alone take care of the economy. Clinton believes that government should direct the economy. Bush believes that wealthy Americans are taxed too much. Clinton wants to raise their taxes. Bush believes...
Wait. Before the break, where are you reading from?
No,
I don't want people to have a break and then listen.
All right, well, I'll take a break and come right back to this.
Hold it. Wait a minute. This is awful.
All right, I'll come right back to this. And I'm trying to say this is how the Bush administration wants to frame the differences between Bush and Clinton. Because they want to say, look, forget what we haven't done. The question now is, what is the debate about the future, and how do we frame the debate? Because their best chance of winning this election is being able to say, we stand for this, Bill Clinton stands for this.
No question
and
about
on
it.
that question, this election may depend.
Yep.
Back in a moment, Robert Reich, longtime friend of Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas, a political scientist, a political economist at the Kennedy School at Harvard. Back in a moment. We're back with Robert Reich. Here is the point. If you look, you're an economist, you're looking at this thing, you're giving economic advice to Governor Clinton. There is this consensus, it seems to me, that the Bush staff and the Bush, Jim Baker and the Bush campaign has to say this election is about the future. It's not about the past. It's not about what I've done over 4 years. It's not even about what Governor Clinton's done over the last 12 years as governor of Arkansas. It's about who can best make this economy work, because we know we need jobs. We know we need programs. We need to make a difference. We've got to get the economy rolling again. And they want to define it in terms of what we'll do versus what Governor Clinton will do. And here is what the Bush campaign and the Bush speech at the Detroit Economic Club or the Commonwealth Club said following it. Bush believes he wants the government to leave the economy alone and let the free market take care of it. Clinton believes that government has to come in and play a role. You agree with that?
Well, look at the savings and loan bailout. I mean, that was all under the Bush administration's watch. In fact, here's a quiz for you. Who was the
Jim Baker.
charge of the... You don't even know what I was asking. Who was in charge? Who was in charge of the deregulation task force in the Reagan administration that recommended taking letting
George Bush. I don't know. Who?
Yes, it was George
Bush.
He was in charge. I mean, these notions that who created a $1.5 trillion addition to the debt?
George Bush.
Yes. You're getting this game very well. You've been practicing.
I know the answer
You've been practicing
to all your questions, which is George Bush. All right, but what's wrong with this? Why shouldn't we? I mean, this country the free market's been very good to us. Let it alone. Let the economy grow. We don't need you guys coming in there and messing with it and trying to fine-tune it. Let it grow of its own.
There's nobody messing.
What's wrong with it?
Nobody messing.
Ronald Reagan had it right.
Let me get some time to respond. There's nobody messing. Okay, there's nobody messing with the number one.
You're going to get those guys who's government planners in there.
Charlie, number one, you've got to invest publicly and privately. Now, Clinton's plan has a lot of private investment incentives, investment tax credit, and extending the research and development. But you also, wait a minute, you also have public incentives with regard to public investment. It's not redistribution. It's not redistribution from the wealthy
I know.
to the
You want
poor.
to tax the people, then take the money and give it to some bureaucrats and say, you go invest it.
No,
Why not give
minute.
incentives to business to go do this?
Well, the business is going to have an awful lot of incentives. The only people going to be taxed are the people who are earning over $200,000 as a family. And remember, they were taxed so much less after 1981 than they were taxed before 1981 that the small increase in their marginal tax that Clinton is recommending is only about 25% back
and how much
to
money
what
is that
they
going
were
to generate?
$92 billion
really?
over 4 years.
Over 4 years. So you're talking about 22.
Okay, but then you're also cutting military expenditures by $40 billion over 4 years.
Okay.
Also, you have you're closing the loophole with regard to transfer pricing, corporate transfer pricing. So you're getting money that you can invest in the future.
Okay, now here's the other point that the Bush administration they raised this point. They're saying that we, the Bush administration, are going to cut government spending to the bone because we want to cut taxes. Therefore, we know we've got to cut spending to the bone. Clinton people want to come in there and they want to spend all this money to go out and build roads, and they want to create new spending programs that look like it's very difficult in order to have that kind of spending without raising taxes, regardless of what the governor says.
Okay. First, I just said, raising taxes just on the people at the top who already have reaped a windfall.
Nobody believes that's enough.
But I believe it. I looked at the numbers.
Okay,
I do think it's enough. I do think it's enough, Charlie.
You really do?
I really do. But let me just say one other thing, and that is that with regard to roads
Ross Perot doesn't
and
think
bridges, well, Ross Perot wants to reduce the budget deficit
Ross
right
Perot
now.
believes that America needs some politicians who have the courage to say we need to raise taxes to take care of the deficit.
Ross Perot didn't even have the courage to run. I mean, he saw his economic plan.
He wrote a book, though.
And he ran in the other direction. Look, you have the only way to get people jobs immediately, and we know this. We've been through this before, and the Depression, and everything else. You take the things that you need as a country to already build, roads and bridges. We have bridges falling apart, sewage systems falling apart. We have water systems falling apart. Initially, you take people, you create jobs, but you do it for things that the nation has to do anyway, in terms of rebuilding
the infrastructure.
Rebuilding the infrastructure.
Let me move on. Bush wants to abolish regulations on business, and he says Clinton wants to add regulations, environmental and otherwise. So we're going to have, on the one hand, Bush, who wants to get rid of that sort of tightening of regulations so that business can flourish, whereas Clinton wants to tighten regulations. That's not healthy for the economy.
Bush is not specific about any of these allegations. He says, I mean, as he said...
This is the way they want to frame the debate.
They want to frame the debate this way. They want to frame but you know the way that... Shall I tell you how I would like to frame the debate?
Yes.
It's between the forces of...
Evil and the forces of...
No. This is I'm going to be objective here. It's between the forces in American history, and there always have been.
Oh, I can't wait to hear this.
You don't believe me, Charlie.
No, I do, but it's... Go ahead, I do.
mean, when you laugh, I can't get this.
No,
this is a serious... I'm being serious here.
I know you are.
The entire American's history has been really a contest between the forces that say it could be worse,
right,
and the forces that say it could be better.
So
there are always, it's not Republicans, Democrats. Right. There are two parties, really.
Yeah.
Under the surface, there are two American parties. There's the it could be worse party, and the it could be better party.
I just find
no
that too
how
simple.
bad,
It's not a question. I do find that a little bit simplistic to say, you know, I mean, it's like those people who say this election is about the future, those people who want to look to the future, those people who want to look to the past.
But these people,
now,
but the Republicans aren't fear-mongering. No, they're fear-mongering. They're saying, we acknowledge that the economy is terrible. We acknowledge that, that over the past 4 years we've lost 38,000 jobs. Remember, George Bush promised 30 million jobs.
Yeah.
Right? We lost 38,000. Right. 0 new jobs. We lost 38,000. But they're saying, in effect, don't trust that guy. It could be worse.
Right.
It could be worse. And what Clinton is saying back is, we've got to invest in the future. We've got to create jobs. We've got to have an economic plan.
Yeah.
We've got to have a more tolerant society. We've got to come together. The rich have to pay their fair share. People at the bottom, off welfare. Only 2 years of welfare, and then you've got to get a job. Everybody has to come together and focus on the future.
And a lot of people who listened to the speech that President Bush made in Detroit and are looking at finally there seemed to be one speech that pulled it all together, are saying, why didn't you make this speech 3 years ago? I mean, where have you been over the last...
Well, see, that's Bush's...
Where have you been over the last 3 or 4 years?
That's Bush's tactical problem. He comes up with a new training idea, which is just basically the same, a smaller version of the Clinton idea.
They pull them together. But I mean, come on, Clinton is recycling some ideas that they experimented with in Arkansas.
Bush's problem is, if he comes up with anything new, people say inevitably, why didn't you do it before? Why now 8 weeks, 9 weeks before the election? On the other hand...
Well, they say more than that. They say, if in fact you're not in favor of government regulation, why did you support the Clean Air Act? They say things, if you don't believe in raising taxes, why did you raise taxes? They say, if you believe in...
But that's a slightly different issue. I think a lot of conservatives were angry at Bush. In fact, I had dinner with Arthur Laffer tonight, and he said that he was voting for Clinton.
This is the father of supply-side economics.
It's the father of supply-side, Arthur Laffer. No, I'm not revealing anything. I mean, he already told the newspaper he was going to vote for Clinton because he can't stand Bush, because he feels that this man doesn't stand for anything, that there are no principles, at least with Reagan. And I disagreed passionately with Ronald Reagan, but at least I knew what he wanted to do. At least he had a...
Here's what some people have some problem with, knowing exactly what Governor Clinton wants to do, because he seems to want to do all these things. One of the geniuses, political people will tell you, of Ronald Reagan, he said, look, if you elect me, I'll cut your taxes, I'll increase defense spending, and I'll balance the budget. Well, he clearly didn't balance the budget, and even the huge deficit grew. But he had a very specific, understandable 3 points that he wanted to do as president. Everybody knew what he wanted to do, and they understood where he was.
If I forgot tonight to bring the Clinton economic plan.
Right.
But the Clinton economic plan makes it very clear. What you want to do is public investment, $220 billion over 4 years. You want to reduce the deficit down to $170 billion at the end of 4 years, and that's modest growth. That's 2.5% economic growth, very modest growth. And at the same time, the money is going to come from people at the top and reductions in military. Very, very clear. There's no... and also, we're going to have a health care system that controls health care costs and expands the base so that other people have health care insurance in this country.
That's a very tough challenge to do.
Very
to control cost on health care and expand the base.
Hard.
You're asking for most people look at that and they say, I don't know how you can do that with respect to health care.
Charlie, it's all going to be hard. Yeah. This is not going to be easy. I mean, nobody... See, here's back to my worries. If you want to know my real worry, it's that if Governor Clinton is elected November 3rd, the country has so many aspirations. There's so many things that have not been done over the past years. There's such a pent-up demand for fixing things. Government has been so drained of its capacity to do things that it's going to be very hard. People are going to expect changes right away. There's not going to be changes right away.
Good to see you.
Good to see
you,
Charlie.
very much, always. Robert Reich, he is at the Kennedy School of Government, a close friend of Governor Clinton, as he said, has known him for a long, long time. We'll return in a moment with Dennis Miller, back after this break.